Ladies and gentlemen, we are back for your favorite time of the week. We are adults. We are talking about cool stuff. You're listening to ATACS episode number 45. I am your host, Paul from Atlanta, and joining me today on our illustrious video game panel is Mr. Will from Greenville, North Carolina. Hello, Will. How are you?
Magnificent.
Also joining us from the big city of New York, Mr. Ryan. Hello, Ryan. How's it going?
Thumbs up. Let's do this.
All right, we're ready. And last but not least, Mr. Flex from Raleigh, North Carolina. How are you doing, Flex?
Can I make a plug?
Absolutely. Go ahead. Plug away.
We did a Banner Saga spoiler cast last week.
We did do a Banner Saga spoiler cast. I believe that's already been edited and uploaded to the channel.
It's there. You can listen to it.
Yeah. I guess we'll just give the generic, whenever we do spoiler casts, they are spoiler casts. So if you are interested in the Banner Saga and don't want to be spoiled, maybe you don't listen to it first. Maybe you play the games first because they're good video games and you should do that.
Indeed.
So anyway, but you'll find that on our YouTube channel along with all of the episodes that we've done. And we're going to talk about video games. We're going to talk about some cool stuff. And Will, why don't you tell us what you've been doing first?
Whoa, first thing, huh?
First in the batter's box.
Wake up, Will.
Oh, man. Okay. Well, last night I was up until 1:30 playing Vampyr. I'm just going to say both the names really fast.
There you go.
So that maybe no one will be like, hey, how do you actually pronounce that game? And that
Will, how do you pronounce that game?
I don't know, man. I don't know. I call it Vampyr, but then if someone says, why isn't it called Vampire? I can't make a compelling argument as to why that's not the game.
I've always leaned Vampyr because if they wanted to be pronounced vampire, they should have spelled it correctly.
Right.
That's my argument.
Yeah. So that game is clearly hooking me a little bit. I think the writing is super good, which I guess you would expect from Don't Nod pedigree, of Life is Strange fame.
How many times do they say hella?
Well, I haven't heard any of that yet, but
okay.
I haven't met too many. I mean, this is around the time of the Spanish flu,
which is a problem.
I don't know if hella was a thing, But yeah.
But what if it was?
Then our conversations would be a little more colorful. I mean, no, I think the equivalent in terms of like cool accents is like, we're in London, so some of them have some serious Cockney going on, and so I guess in some ways maybe that's sort of
all right.
The cool or different language that this game has going for it. So people are like or whatever it is.
Man, I didn't know you were British, Will.
I know. I can turn it on and off. You know what I mean? I've been called a British redneck before when I played Call of Duty.
Yeah, that was the most creative insult I've heard on Xbox Live.
I was totally baffled, but I just went with it. I was like, well, I don't know if I should be offended about that or not. But anyway, so Vampyr's fun. Our own Nate has covered it before. A little bit over here, but most of the gripes I've kind of heard about it. I've heard that the combat was a little bit inferior, and so far I can't say I've necessarily found that to be the case. I can't say it's like the most amazing combat system, but it's been able to create some tough choices for me. The core of this game, it's kind of trying to pull off a balancing act. And the act is, if you do not feed on one of the citizens in that one of the named citizens in the game, you're going to be a little bit under-leveled if you try and proceed through the story. And so the tough choice it tries to say is like, well, you can do the combat. I mean, you can get in there and fight, but it's going to be really hard if you refuse to feed on anybody. And I think if you're one of these people who is just really adept, at dealing with enemies, and maybe you're just quick in terms of reflexes and learning combat systems, then maybe that tension won't be there for you, But for me, I will say it was. I mean, there was a time where I started fighting enemies that were, 4 and 5 levels higher than me. They were taking a lot of hits. They were doing a lot of damage to me. And so I started kind of really feeling like, well, somebody might have to go.
Someone's not going to make it. I need to level up.
Yeah. So the and of course the other thing the game does, which in some ways is a little bit gimmicky, is that the more you know about one of these named characters that you feed on, the more experience you get from them. So it's almost like the more human they are to you, the harder it is. Supposedly, the harder it'll be maybe to kill them. So that's kind of the main kind of tension. And so a lot of the reviews I've heard were, one, that the combat system wasn't good, and two, that tension didn't really exist for them. And so, and of course I can't speak for anybody else. I will say that it has worked pretty well for me. So, so that's been a lot of fun. I think there are a lot of, you've got your main quest where you're basically trying to sort of scientifically, figure out what happened. Like, why are you a vampire? What are your abilities? What can you do? How'd you get this? Who was your maker? But then there are these little investigations that you do for the citizens, not only to kind of learn more about them, but there's often some extra story elements that you get by checking this out. So a lot of times there's not really so many quests that are like, hey, go get a screwdriver and come back and I'll give you some money. A lot of the quests are like, maybe you'll go find a screwdriver, but while you're there, you'll discover some little crazy vampire den, or you'll meet a new character, or find a note that gives you more insight on a different character, or maybe the character who gave you that task had actually killed somebody with that screwdriver and he wants it so that, no one can figure out what happened, or, so I think the game overall, I'm enjoying. I think my main kind of gripes with it are, I really think a fast travel system would be pretty awesome, because there are 4 boroughs in London and they're kind of spread out. So that would be a nice thing, is to be able to kind of get around quickly. In addition, I think sometimes the quest markers don't show up quite the way they should. If you look at the overmap, you get to see them, but then if you're actually trying to follow it while you're in game, sometimes it'll kind of lead you in weird directions or kind of just disappear, and so you don't really quite know where you're supposed to be going. So there are a couple of little irritations, but I'm looking forward to getting back in it. Clearly, it's got its hooks in me a little bit, and I think that's fun. And to cap it all off, I mean, I'm Dr. Jonathan Reid.
You're Dr. Jonathan Reid.
Wait,
that's right.
Yeah,
I thought we already had met Dr. Jonathan Reid before.
Maybe.
I mean, it's just kind of like James Bond.
There's like an existential crisis here.
Who is Dr. Jonathan Reid?
I can confidently say that I am not Dr. Jonathan Reid.
But can you confidently say that?
Yes.
Will I ever see you and Dr. Jonathan Reid together at the same time?
Have you ever been in a room with Dr. Jonathan Reid?
We're all Dr. Jonathan Reid on the inside.
How far into the game do you think you are?
Well, there appear to be 4 boroughs. I've met probably all the citizens. I've probably met, I'd say 75% of the citizens, maybe.
Okay.
Like that. And so I think there's one more borough that I haven't explored. But just like Nate, I've been doing lots of side stuff. So
yeah, I was about to ask how completionist you're being with this.
Pretty completionist, just because it all seems pretty thoughtfully produced. The content. There's not a lot of. It doesn't feel like there's a lot of filler.
Yeah. So Nate said something when he was talking about it, and I'm curious if you agree with this or not. If Nate was on here, you two could have a face off on this potentially. I don't know, but he said that he felt. I mean, I feel like he liked the game overall, but he said one thing I thought was interesting is he said this game felt like a game that would have been made like a decade ago.
Huh.
And that's not necessarily like I don't think he meant it as a negative, but more of just like the style of game it is a lot the style of game that existed a lot about 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And then maybe also just some of the combat stuff, like the way that works, felt like an older game. I don't know if any of that.
Huh.
Like,
well, I do. I mean, the only thing I guess I can say that I noticed on that front is the hair looks really bad.
Okay,
that's funny.
All of the characters in the game, like their hair looks like like it's just sort of piled on top of their head like wheat or something like that.
Nice.
But
because about 10 years ago we were getting games like the first Witcher, the first Assassin's Creed, like kind of those early HD era like action adventure games that were like, you know, kind of figuring stuff out.
Yeah. Well, I guess I feel like there's, and I didn't finish The Witcher, the first one, but I feel like there's probably more common ground there than there is with Assassin's Creed.
Yeah. I was just giving a couple examples of stuff.
Yeah, in terms of like the thoughtfulness of the writing and stuff.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it feels necessarily outdated to me, but I've also got a couple years on Nate. I don't know if maybe I'm like more comfortable with games that were made 10 years ago.
Yeah, I don't know. I was just curious if anything like that had stuck out to you, and I think it was as much of just like a game design, because like just the way like those kind of games don't get made much anymore. Like even The Witcher, like The Witcher 3 is a big open world game. It's not kind of like, you know, these zones where you're like just the structure of it, I guess.
And it is kind of, I guess it's kind of open world. You know, that's another thing that's kind of tough is that you want to meet all the citizens in every district just because they can typically give you hints and details about other people in the district that you can then use to sort of like figure out like little investigations to do to improve the quote unquote quality of their blood. So you want to meet everybody, but there's not really, at least that I've found, a good way to do that. So it's almost like you just go into the district and wander around, you know, and look for people that don't shoot you on sight. And then those are typically the named characters in the zones. You know, those are the ones that you actually want to know about.
That's a real interesting way to find that out.
That's a really kind of a weird thing in this game is that, like, you know, although you work in a hospital, there must be, I don't know, maybe there's some sort of telltale sign, but, you know, you work in a hospital and you have all these relationships with all these civilians, but there are still vampire hunters who are like wandering around in each of the districts and they know you're a vampire like on sight. They're immediately not happy with you. And so that's kind of been an interesting situation. I'm always like, how do you guys know?
I'm just walking around. I don't understand.
They're like, I don't know, but anyway, so
hair.
that's
it's the hair. It's the wheat hair. Yeah,
that's they're like, this guy's wheat hair doesn't look quite as weedy as the real civilians. So yeah, I don't know if anybody has any more questions about Vampyr/Vampire.
Yeah, I'm glad you're enjoying it.
Yeah.
I think it's fun. The other thing I guess I wanted to kind of mention is a game called Far Lone Sales. And I've already mentioned this to Flex because I thought that it would be something that he might get into. This came out earlier in 2018 as an indie game, like a side-scrolling sort of atmospheric situation. And it reviewed pretty well. I was kind of reluctant to get started on it just because the premise didn't seem like it could really be as engaging as the game actually ends up being. But basically, you play this little guy in a desolate wasteland, and you've got this giant vehicle, and you're trying to get somewhere. You know, like the game doesn't really give you, there's not like any text really in the game.
Right.
And so you just kind of hop in it and kind of get moving. And just take this journey. And I think some of the things that are cool about it, one, it just kind of, you gotta really get in this rhythm. I think between like how gorgeous the backdrops are in the game, like you're driving through this sort of desolate wasteland, and so there are times where you'll drive by old factories or you'll drive by a volcano, or you get caught in a hailstorm, or you get caught in the rain, and it's just really kind of serene and I guess kind of engrossing. But between the backdrops and the really gorgeous soundscape, like the music is very good. Like a lot of the noises in the game are very good. Like, when you're actually kind of cranking the vehicle to move, or when you're putting fuel in it, or when you're releasing steam, or raising your sails. And there's this kind of rhythm where you're basically putting, you're putting fuel in it to make sure it's fueled. You're releasing the steam when it builds up too much. If you see that the wind's going the right direction, you want to put your sails up. And then you kind of end up adding more to the whole formula kind of as you go. So you get an ability to, because there's certain times where your big machine, I guess, will break down. And so it's kind of like you might have to fix it, or and so you get like a fire extinguisher and like a little like welder that you put in your ship, or your boat, or whatever you call it. And you can fix stuff. Otherwise, you can kind of and another thing that you can do in the game is interesting is you can use anything that you find for fuel. So it kind of, I think, between the fact that you see no one else around, and this is something I mentioned in my review of the game, between the fact that you see no one else around, so if you break down, no help is coming, and the fact that you can kind of use anything for fuel, it kind of gives you this feeling of like a survival game without having any survival irritations or survival mechanics.
Gotcha.
There's no like food meter or anything, or thirst meter, but you still kind of feel like sort of this lone scavenger, but it can be really, really engaging and really satisfying when you actually kind of get everything worked out the correct way, so that you're actually like really making some good progress. But because there's so little to think about, you really kind of get into this flow, and so I remember I was in the middle of playing it, and a friend called me and he was like, "Hey man, you want to play this other game?" And I was like, "Not really. I'm kind of really feeling this boat ship."
I'm doing this boat ship thing. It's great.
I'm doing this boat ship, and I'm going from left to right, and I don't know if I have time to play other things. But it's just a really cool experience. There's a psychologist who talks about this concept of flow, and this idea that you're just kind of entirely engrossed in something, where you kind of get into this sort of hyper focus zone.
Right.
And I think the game, through like the minimalist but gorgeous design and the way that you pilot the ship, it kind of helps you kind of ease into that sort of flow or hyper focus, and it's like just engaging enough,
Right.
So it's a cool thing.
Yeah, I'm probably going to check that out at some point. It seems neat.
Yeah.
I think I missed part of the conversation here. What was the name of this game again?
It's called Far Lone Sails.
Okay, and it's a survival game?
Well, I guess it's probably closest to something like a Limbo or an Inside, or maybe even like it's 2D. So probably those, but it's not a horror game, and it's not really a puzzle game. So I guess it's a little bit hard. Basically, it's a game about maintaining and piloting this vehicle to a destination that's a long way away. And so that's pretty much, I guess, the best way to kind of describe it.
Okay. I mean, that sounds like a resource management, almost like a survival type thing.
Yeah, it kind of is, but you never really feel like there's always plenty. I mean, if you're paying attention, there's plenty of fuel, but just kind of using it is an interesting thing. There was one time I threw like a stack of books into the engine, and the engine found some way to convert that to fuel. And then I found this big black teddy bear, and I threw it in there, and it's like made it into fuel. I'm like, man, this thing is great. Let's get it.
And it's not like a multiple run type game.
Oh, no, it's just sort of
it's
through, and
more
I
like
think it's
an experience.
I think it's almost 3 hours for one run of it, maybe 2.5, something like that.
And by multiple run, I mean, does it seem procedurally generated? Like, are there?
No, it's everything is purposefully kind of designed.
Okay.
So it's just a once through situation. The only other thing I wanted to mention, and just because Paul told me that he didn't really have much to talk about, I was going to bring it up. I'm about halfway through Contradiction, which is the game that, if you remember, Flex he proposed that I would enjoy after telling him that I played and enjoyed the Late Shift.
Okay.
Recently. And it's something. It's something else.
It's something.
And you basically, you're this detective who's investigating what was ostensibly a suicide, but we've got, we suspect foul play. And so a lot of it is, it plays kind of like, you go around and interview all these suspects and you show them different things that you found. And you're like, hey, do you know anything about this? And your guy is like the supreme ham. Like, he's just like ridiculous. So
the acting is so good.
Yeah. Everything is really like over the top and emphatically said. So like he'll pull out the driver's license and no matter, like, basically here's a good way of saying it. So if you like, the game's called Contradiction. And so the idea basically is, as you're doing this interviewing, you're trying to find two things that someone says that are contradictory and then call their attention to it. And typically when you do that, you kind of get your next big break in the case.
Right.
But your character, this detective, everything he says sounds like he's caught them in something. And so he'll pull out like the driver's license of the murdered girl. And he's like, have you ever seen, and then he'll put it up and he's like, this. and then the person, like 99% of the time, because no one apparently has seen this driver's license, they're like, no. And he's like, okay. It's just sort of, he just like, this is Looney Tunes. So you're walking around.
It's really hard. I should send you all a clip because it's really hard to convey the level of camp in their acting and just like how perfectly they nail that goofy tone.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, it's a mess. But the funny thing, the thing that I think I'm thinking about is so funny is a lot of what happens in the game is, you've got maybe 6 or 7 people that are your main people that you're interviewing. And usually they're the ones who are kind of giving you information on, did they know this victim? How did they know this victim? What do they know about these different things? And so the way it ends up kind of going is, after a while, you've kind of interviewed everybody that you're going to interview. So you find one new thing. So you might go in the woods and find like a ring. And then the next part of the game, in terms of gameplay, is that you go back through to everybody that you've already talked to and then ask them about this one thing. And so it's literally like, and the fact that the game is FMV, I think actually it makes it more obvious that this is kind of like something a crazy person would do. Like,
right.
I think a lot of times if a game is like animated or stylized, maybe you can somehow forget about how ludicrous it is. But because all these are like real actors and real people, like I'm just imagining like in one night, this guy coming and knocking on my door and being like, sir, I have some questions for you. And then he comes and sits down and he's like, I hear is a book. Do you know anything about this? And I'm like, no. And then he's like, okay, I'll be back later. And then he leaves. And then he goes and like finds a ring on the floor. And then I'm like just trying to sit in my house and he comes back. Hey, sir, another question for you. And then he like pulls out the ring. Do you know this? And I'm like, no. And then he leaves again. All right, be back later. And it's just like the reality of what he's doing seems so insane to me that he just keeps going back to these houses with these little things he's found. He brings a colored pencil. Do you know anything about this? Isn't that a colored pencil? Well, I guess it is. Be back later. And then sometimes I'll come in and I'll forget and like I'll think, I'm like, have I asked this person about this? And so I'll go in and then we'll sit down and I'm like looking at my little book and then I'll realize that like I don't have anything new to ask them and I'll just leave again. So I'm imagining me walking in the room being like, hey, a few more questions for you. And then I just sit down on his couch and then stand up and leave. It's just like, I think something about the FMV makes me actually think about how ludicrous this gameplay really is, you know?
Yeah, it's quite something.
That's great.
But I think I'm about like halfway through it. I mean, the plot is getting pretty thick. I mean, you know, there's this like Scientology like cult, and they do some really freaky stuff. And this girl was apparently attending classes at this funky Scientology cult called Atlas, and they're just bad folks, you know. They're just bad, heartless people. But anyway, so that's kind of Contradiction. So right. And I don't really know, like, there's no, well, if you like this, you'll probably like Contradiction. It's hard to really
Contradiction is a game all on its own, it sounds like.
Yeah, it is. If you look on Steam, it's like unbelievably well reviewed for what it is.
Well, like, so the thing, like, so it's like those 90s FMV adventure games that were generally pretty bad. Right. But, like, this one seems like it's actually very well made, but they also intentionally made it very campy and cheesy like those 90s ones were, but they actually, like, executed on the camp well. So it's like they took this idea of this goofy thing that existed in the 90s and then actually did it well.
Yeah,
and
I think that's probably true.
Yeah, I think it's great.
Yeah, so
that it exists.
That's what I've been playing, Paul.
All right, that sounds excellent. I'm looking forward to reading the 1,000-word review that you're going to write whenever you're finished with that one.
Whenever I'm finished with Contradiction.
Yes, exactly. Also, I'm going to go look up some YouTube clips because this just sounds hilarious.
You should.
It is hilarious.
You should.
So quick update for me. As we've talked about, I've been going through the Dragon Ball Z Kai with Steph, and I don't remember exactly where we left off at, but Goku punched Vegeta a whole lot, and then Vegeta punched Goku a whole lot, and then he turned into a big ape, and then he broke Goku's legs, which I was not expecting that. And then everyone got better, and they're on an alien planet now, looking for some more Dragon Balls, because apparently Vegeta killed a lot of people that I didn't know who any of them were, which was excellent. They're just running around looking for these Dragon Balls, and then there's this guy in a floating wheelchair named Frieza who looks like he's pretty scary, but he's just sitting in his wheelchair. So I'm looking forward to seeing him stand up. And that's really about as far as I've gotten in Dragon Ball Z Kai. There was a lot of stuff that happened, but I don't really remember most of it. I'm just waiting on Frieza to stand up, and that should be exciting. I think I'm getting there. So we'll I'll have another Dragon Ball Z Kai update for you at the next ATACS. And the only other thing I've really been doing is been playing some a little bit more No Man's Sky, which is still surprisingly good. The game actually subverted my expectations fairly well the other day. Each one of these systems that you warp into, there's a starbase, and then there are multiple planets in the system. And you just, go on the planets, you explore, there's plants, there's animals, they're all different, but there's this sort of template that each system follows. And I jumped into this one system, and I'm like, okay, there's no starbase here. That's kind of weird, because that's where you sell your stuff, you get side quests, and it's kind of like the hub for the system. And I'm like, okay, well, maybe it didn't load or something. And then I look, and there's 2 planets, and one of them is a type I've never seen before called Erased Planet. And I didn't know what that was, so I'm like, all right, I'm gonna go fly down here and see what this is. No plants, no animals. Just these weird sort of like floating rock things that your scanner picks up as a plant, even though it's obviously not. And the whole planet just seemed kind of weird. In like there weren't caves or anything like you would normally see, and everything on the planet just gives you like one of the very, very basic elements that really is worthless. So I did a quick Google search, and apparently the erased planets are kind of like glitches, not glitches in the game, glitches in this universe where there should have been something there, but the Sentinels, who are these robots that fly around, they did something and they kind of messed up, and it's almost like there was a bug in their code, and they erased all the stuff on the planet and made this weird sort of just weird like rocky outcroppings. So that was something that I was not expecting to see. So and I think those are new as of the latest update. So that's just one of those random things where you think like what kind of boundaries that you're going to be operating within as far as the game system goes, and it just completely subverted that in a way that I wasn't really expecting. So I made quick work of that system and jumped out and went somewhere normal again. But for about half an hour going on with this game right now, because this is not normal. This is not what they've sort of taught you to expect, and that was something new that they added in the last update. So that was good. And I'm still working on it. Still building out my fleet. Still building my base. I finally found a habitable planet that doesn't want to kill you, so I'm starting the base building stuff, and it seems fairly well put together. So I'm kind of interested to see where that ends up going. But yeah, that's the quick DBZ Kai and No Man's Sky updates.
Are you pretty happy with where No Man's Sky is right now?
Yeah, I would say that if this version of the game came out on release, it would have lived up to the pre-release hype. So I am fairly happy with it, and it's also a nice game to just sort of like sit down and there's no real pressure and just kind of chill.
Chill out, bro.
Yeah, it's a good podcast game. So I'm fairly happy with it.
Cool. It took it 2 years, but I'm glad that No Man's Sky got somewhere that people are enjoying it.
Yeah, and I think at this point, like if you've never played it, and you only like saw it from a distance, and you were mildly interested, this is definitely the version of the game that you should get into. So yeah, it's been a lot of fun, and they have done a lot better about kind of guiding you through the important bits. But they still have those times, like, when I warped into that system where I had to alt tab and be like, what is this? Because this doesn't make sense. Like I was legitimately thinking that my game glitched. But nope, that's the way it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a quick No Man's Sky update.
Cool.
Ryan, what you been doing up in New York?
Well, as far as games go, I have been killing slimes, killing monsters, and exploring caverns. So,
bum, 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 bum,
yep, yep. That's. I guess that's the new thing. Which that's Dragon Quest XI. I just started this past week or so. And I'm only a few hours in, so I don't have a ton to say at it at this point. But
is it a Dragon Quest game?
Yeah, it's definitely a Dragon Quest game.
Okay. I had to be sure.
I think, that's the thing I was going to say kind of summarily, is that it is a Dragon Quest game. It feels a lot like 8 in terms of gameplay. They've added some small tweaks like, jumping around and some of the like, I guess, quote unquote limit break system and the upgrade grids. But at its core,
the pet system.
Yes.
I'm just messing with you.
That's what I was talking about. Thank you for clarifying. But anyway, yeah, I guess the biggest.
Are you enjoying it so far?
So far, yeah.
I know
it feels a lot like Dragon Quest VIII. If you like Dragon Quest VIII,
yeah,
I have a game for you.
Yeah, and for better or worse, that's kind of what I read, is that it is very similar to probably particularly 8. Some people love, some people maybe not as much, but I liked 8.
Yeah, I thought 8 was a cool game. So we'll see if 11, which that's kind of what I was expected. I mean, 8 was solid, so I haven't seen anything that really rocks the formula. I guess a couple things though is that one is that the graphics are actually better than I expected.
Yeah, it's a pretty looking game from what I've seen.
Yeah, I guess with that sort of cell shaded, like pseudo animated, I'm not sure exactly how you would describe that. I expected there to be a limited space in like how great that style would look. But I guess with games like Breath of the Wild and Dragon Quest XI, they've really just kind of pushed the envelope on that stuff, and they've done a lot with lighting. So I mean, the characters still look pretty Dragon Quest 8-ish, and the monsters all have this kind of cutesy animation, but when they do landscapes and stuff like that, it actually is just kind of like, wow. I was not expecting this game to kind of get to this level.
That's pretty cool.
And then I guess we'll see how the story goes. And I mean, I don't want to, I definitely don't want to spoil anything. Storytelling has been okay. I think some of the beats have been, and I think, like, I don't think this is a spoiler. Like, I think this is pretty much in the premise of the game. Like, your character is kind of this quote unquote luminary. So you're a hero. Like, I so far they've been a little more. I feel like that's. I mean, the storytelling is not bad, but I feel like that's been a little bit more campy and predictable than I would perhaps like. Like maybe not quite as referential or developmental. But I guess we'll see if that changes at all. It just feels like
you said?
This is 11.
11, okay.
Yeah. It feels a little bit more cookie cutter and straightforward. Whereas, I feel like there's nothing wrong with that story. It's a very familiar story, but they could do more with like either character development or just referencing previous games, particularly like the first few games. That could be cool. So we'll see how that goes.
What are you playing it on PS4 or PC?
PS4.
Is it out on PC already? Was that
the
same release
date? Yeah, it launched PS4 and PC at the same time, and there is a Switch version coming. I don't know when though.
I would almost say,
but yeah, it's on Steam right now as well.
And I guess this might segue a little bit into one of the other games I've been playing, Avernum. One thing I have noticed, and there's a bit of a contrast here, is that, and I think I'll still enjoy Dragon Quest, but like JRPGs are games you can kind of chill out and just zone out a little bit on.
Right.
But it being on a console actually makes that a little, I guess, less of a thing. And I don't multitask a ton when I play games, and it doesn't really bother me. Like, I usually just get in the zone and enjoy it. But I have noticed, because I've been playing Avernum, which I talked about a little bit on the last podcast, and that's Avernum is like a turn-based grid sort of an old school Western RPG. And when I play Avernum, I actually often have it like in a window with like a YouTube video up or something, like just some background noise. And that, that game is so small, like it's completely turn-based. So pretty much if you're not doing anything, like the game's not moving, like, and it doesn't use a ton of like computer, it doesn't use, like, it's not spinning up my graphics card, like, cause it's so light on resources. So it just, like, it's easy to kind of step away or look away from that game and just do it in sort of a multitask, like zone out fashion. Whereas with with a console JRPG, it's something I'm probably not going to just leave sitting there for a long time.
Yeah. So, yeah, that is true of like when I sit for me as well. Like maybe it's just dependent on anyone's given setup for their like console space. But yeah, for me, like if I go to where my PS4 is, it's like, all right, I'm focused solely on that because there's nothing else around to interact with. Whereas like my PC setup, I have 2 monitors. So if I wanted to, I could like have something playing on the other monitor. If it's a game that doesn't require my full attention, which a lot of games I play do require full attention, but if it happens to be something that doesn't, like maybe a grindy JRPG, you could have something else up.
Yeah. So I did notice that. I guess playing the 2 RPGs back to back, and it's like, like, I can see, like, I tend to prefer focusing a lot of times, but it's like I can kind of see like the advantage of JRPGs like living on like mobile like your 3DS or whatever, your Switch, like where if you want to just chill out and play that game, and while you're, I don't know, looking at homework or something on the side, like you can just kind of have it sitting there and like, move the stick around until you hit an encounter, and then like press the A button until you get some experience.
Yeah.
But anyway, I digress. So I've been playing Avernum. I think I'm a good chunk of the way through that game. And it's been pretty cool. It's pretty low touch, so I can do it casually. But it's kind of neat the way that game harkens back to, I still can't put my finger on an exact example. Like games that come to mind are things like Ultima and Might and Magic.
Right.
But I don't know that it's exactly in either of those patterns. It feels a bit more like I guess like a straight PC game.
Okay.
So yeah, it's a little. There's probably a better example that I'm missing, but it's kind of neat. It's chill. It's light. It feels like one of those kind of old school, like late 80s through mid 90s, like Western RPGs that's very heavily like D&D influenced.
And it's kind of interesting that you use the adjective chill, because whenever I think back to those games, they were very not chill. Like at least the ones that I played. I mean, it was like I remember sitting down and launching some of those when I was really just like a kid, and being so incredibly overwhelmed with the number of things on the screen and how much I was expected to know in the first 15 seconds of gameplay. But that's just kind of one of those where you're talking about it and I'm like, yeah, I just remember those being terrifying, but okay.
Well, and I guess that is one thing that Avernum does fairly well, is that it's, it definitely still has a lot of some of those old design, like I don't know if it's nods or just mentalities, sympathies, whatever, but it's not completely holding your hand, but the way the main quest is set up and the difficulty level and things like that, like you have difficulty options, and
right.
It definitely is not quite as obtuse and arcane and hardcore. Like you have quick saves and quick loads and things like that. So some of that old garbage where you're just like, playing Might and Magic 2 and you wander off the first town and like into like a beholder or a bone dragon or something stupid and die in like 10 minutes. I'm sure in Avernum they don't really restrain you from going into the toughest areas, but if you do so, you're doing so consciously,
right?
Wandering way off into the wilderness. So yeah, that's been, and it's the writing is not bad. It's a touch campy, but I wouldn't say it's like, it's not really cringeworthy in my mind. And like, they definitely have some cool moments where you're like, even though it's just a little turn-based game, like you're wandering off and it's like this section of the cave, you run across like, let's say some, like a natural waterfall, like coming off the cave, and like, running into magma pools or something like that. So they have these kind of moments where you do something cool, or they describe some part of the natural environment, which you might see in like a local D&D campaign. Like there's some cool stuff mixed in there.
Right.
Along with the generic questing and mild campiness. So that's been fun. And I guess the last thing is just, we've been doing a little bit of monster hunting. Not going to spend a lot of time on this, but we did Behemoth a couple times as a group. That's been pretty cool. It's an interesting thing where they put kind of these MMO mechanics into Monster Hunter, and they did it pretty well. It's a funny fit and design crossover, but that's one of the things I've really liked about Monster Hunter this year is that they just constantly are adding new content, like adding relevant content and putting in interesting things to do.
Right.
Yeah, I'm glad they did. It's not one of my more favorite fights in the game, but it is nice that they're constantly adding stuff and trying different ideas out. Because it's gotten me to come back to it throughout the year, and all of it's been free.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, the stuff they give you too is relevant. Like the Draken armor is considered pretty strong. Like, and then you get a couple cosmetics for doing it. And I guess like one thing about that fight is I do feel like, and I guess maybe this is consistent with an MMO, like it brushes up against the gear requirements a little bit more. And that's something I'm not as big a fan of, because I think one of the ways I've enjoyed Monster Hunter is like not always focusing on getting to the end game and grinding out like a min-maxed build. I find that when I start really looking at that stuff, is when I enjoy the game less versus when I'm just kind of like, doing side quests or and I'll take on tough hunts, by all means. I did Arch-Tempered Kushala Daora this morning. But if you really are just kind of crossing your fingers and hoping you're getting the exact decorations and kind of repeating hunts over and over for it, I feel like that's, it's the ARPG loop. Like I guess it's a hook, but I find that, that system, the game gives you a lot without you having to do so much grinding. But I guess that top little sliver, getting certain builds set up, like, can be more demanding, and that kind of RNG, like, I'm not as much of a fan of.
Yeah, and I think
Ryan's neglected the most important aspect of the Behemoth fight, and that's if you complete the Behemoth fight, you get a new costume for your Poogie, which is a pig. There's a little pig that runs around in the trade yard in Monster Hunter World, and you can give him a new outfit, and it's really amazing. And it's really the main reason to do the fight. I mean, the Draken armor is nice, but when it comes to my money, new Poogie outfit is where it's at. Okay,
I'm not going to argue. I'm not going to dispute that. I mean, I did put in a plug for cosmetics, although I will say that my Palico is running around as a Moogle right now. Pretty funny.
I feel much the same way when, like, I'm basically at that point where if I wanted to get quote unquote better gear, like, I would need to do all the min-maxing with the decorations and the augmentations and that stuff. And I think the game, for the most part, has been really good about, like, how you go about getting new gear is not really that much of a hassle, like, as compared to other RPGs, at least. Like, just picking out a set of armor you want and weapon you want to make, like, and doing that is not really that much of a hassle. But yeah, it's that, like you said, it's that very top tier of, like, fine tuning with getting like the decorations you want and that stuff, that you start looking into that and you're just like, oh, I don't want to do this. And that's I think that's where I hit my wall with the grinding.
Yeah, it's like if you set your sights on those progression, which is perfectly natural, and I've seen, I feel like some of my my friends who play this game, maybe or maybe not people who sit on this panel, like when you really set your sights on that, that's when the game can become a grind. Whereas if you just enjoy the content, and enjoy the gameplay, and I guess, to give an example specifically, like you were saying, Flex, if you want a pretty good build, there's a lot of stuff that's viable. And I know I was looking into things like tanking for Behemoth and getting my block ability up. And I found this post on Reddit, and it was saying, okay, well, if you want kind of a min-max guard build, here's what we think is optimal. But it's if you don't have this piece of armor or this charm or this decoration, then here's another set. And it's and you lose maybe one armor skill. And it's and if you don't have this, here's another set.
Yeah.
And you lose 2 armor skills. And it's and it's kind of nice because, you can go all the way down into something that's easy to get, and you might be losing 3 or 4 armor skills. But then, I guess one of the specific things I was talking about with this Behemoth fight is that a lot of its attacks aren't blockable unless you have this guard up armor skill, which is found on a decoration that's a pretty rare drop, or it's found on a 3-piece armor set. So, if you really want, for Extreme Behemoth, maybe if you really want to be the best tank you can be, you really want to get that decoration so you don't have to use 3 pieces of inferior armor. And, it kind of requires some things that I think if you were going to do Extreme Behemoth, you would probably need to have gotten lucky and invested some time in just getting specific things. But anyway, I digress. I still am enjoying that game. I was doing some hunts for fun yesterday and today, so that's all for me. I guess I have covered my ramble of various RPGs and ARPGs.
Ramble of Jamble. And one really quick thing that I was looking at while you were talking about it, I didn't realize Dragon Quest XI came out on 3DS.
Japan only.
Okay.
Yeah, so the game...
I was confused.
Yeah, the game came out in Japan earlier this year or last year, and it was on 3DS and PS4. When it came out here, it was PS4, and then simultaneously came out on Steam worldwide.
Yeah, that's just kind of funny. It's just I'm thinking this is PS4, PC, 3DS. Which one of these is not like the other?
Yep.
So, all right.
I wouldn't be surprised if it sold better on 3DS than on PS4 in Japan either.
Yeah, that's how that works over there in that Japan.
They don't play consoles much. They like portable stuff.
They like their handhelds.
It's like we were talking about, right? JRPGs are great for a commute, great for casual play.
It's actually an interesting part of the 3DS version too. It has a 16-bit stylized view that you can use.
That's interesting.
Wow.
Yeah, so I think you can. If I remember correctly, in one of the early Dragon Quest XI trailers, they showed this, and if I remember correctly, it was you can toggle between the 3D or 2D style of graphics on the 3DS version.
So, does it seem like they were maybe leaning a little bit harder into the throwback aspect of the game?
I mean, that's what it sounds like.
Okay. Yeah, I feel like that's something that has almost been lacking in, just in the way the story is set up, that you're kind of the reincarnation of this hero or whatever. It's well, why don't they reference some of the very early games a little bit harder?
Right. So, anyway, all right. So, thank you, Brian. Flex, what's been going on over in your neck of the woods?
So this game came out on the Nintendo Switch.
Okay.
Called Into the Breach.
I think we might have talked about this one.
Oh, the Into the Breach hour. It's like...
It's a very good video game.
I'm going to go make a sandwich, maybe a roast or something,
so,
and I'll get back.
I'm going to tell you about the squad called the Rusting Hulks. I won't talk that much about Into the Breach, but I did pick it up on Switch and maybe got back into it a little bit here and there.
That's too funny.
It's
pretty there and everywhere.
Are you planning a trip to Japan?
I don't know. Maybe. Do I need to? I can do that.
That's fine.
I'm down.
I still think that's...
Yeah, it's a good game, and Switch version seems good. Not that that's a demanding game, but like, you know, technology-wise, but the Switch version seems totally competent. But I won't talk about that much because I've talked about it enough. So Nate and I started A Way Out.
Okay.
We have played a couple hours of that, and we will continue to play, and man, that is a silly game.
Yeah.
The writing is something else. It's just like some of the lines your two characters have are just like things people would never say, and they're clearly written to like just provide commentary for the player or like direct the player somewhere. And it's like, if you really think about it, it's like, that's a really dumb line no one would ever say.
Would you say it deserves an Oscar?
You know, I don't know that they would want an Oscar for this.
I understand.
Yeah, so we're probably like 3-ish hours in. I don't know. It's been fine. I think it's very like the whole the like thing with the game is that it's like super co-op centric. So you're trying to escape from prison, and you're constantly having to work together to get through these situations. But most of the situations are very straightforward. It's like, all right, I go pick up an object and then go hand it through the fence to give it to the other person, and then they walk to the spot where they use it and use it. So it's like there's not really much puzzly aspect to it, is I guess what I'm saying. It's like, it's really like they bank on like passing objects back and forth, but there's not really like any thought process to it, if that makes sense. So I'm kind of hoping the later half of the game will like kind of like have some more interesting interactions. So far, I don't feel like there's really been a whole lot. There was one scene where you're kind of having to deal with guards walking back and forth, and you have to kind of indicate to the other player like when they're clear to do something. And I think more stuff in that kind of realm could be interesting. Even if that first time they did it was just like very basic implementation of that, but I think they could. I think that game would be more interesting if they had more ambitious ways of like, you know, making use of there being two players in the space who have like different, you know, vision on different things or can hear different things, or I don't know, like somehow use different information to help each other. And they haven't really used much of that.
Have you got into any of the touching scenes where one person is doing something heartfelt and the other one is just hanging out?
No, I don't think I've gotten to that yet.
Not any of those yet. Okay. And the other thing I guess I'll say is it's interesting when I played it, the thing that kind of like stuck in my head was kind of like almost like co-op Uncharted or something. Like just between the set pieces and the kind of diversity of gameplay and like the third person, you know, behind the back sort of thing. That's how it ended up kind of feeling to me. I don't know if you've gotten any of that feeling or not, but
Not really, because I guess there's no platforming and no shooting from what I've seen.
Okay.
So I don't really get an Uncharted vibe. Yeah, it's. See, now I'm sitting here like trying to think of like actually what we've done in the game, and it has been a lot of walk around, pick up objects.
Yeah, I was going to ask, like, what's the gameplay, and that sounds.
It's a lot of walk around, pick up objects, hand them to the other person.
Oh.
So far, at least, like I said, we're probably at best a third of the way through, if even that. So it could certainly change. There was one. I don't really consider this a spoiler, but there was one section where this cracked us up, where we had the option to go sneak around the long way or get in a car. And we totally got in the car, and that scene was hilarious. Because, like, you're just barreling straight through, and, like, you're just going straight through all these guards, and they, like, give you these side-eye looks. And it's just like, I guess it's hard to convey because a lot of it's just like in the acting and the framing of the scene, but it's like, the game's pretty goofy at times. But I mean, a lot of it really is like kind of one of the classic scenes they showed early on was like, you get in this, you're like in the like laundry room in the prison. So you're like trying to figure out a way to get past some guards, as you often do. And it's like, all right, let's get some sheets. Let's put them in this bin. Let's get someone to hide in the bin under the sheets. Let's wheel them through. So it's a lot of just like collecting objects and getting stuff set up to go do what you need to do. And for the most part, finding those objects is very simple because you can only interact with things that are meaningful and they're highlighted. So kind of walk around, find the object you need, pick it up, take it where you need to take it has been the majority of what we've done thus far.
Who's playing Vincent and who's playing Leo?
I am Vincent. Nate is Leo.
Gotcha.
Because Nate's obviously the muscle.
Obviously.
They kind of spin it that Leo's the muscle and Vincent's the brains. But yeah, we'll see how that goes. We'll keep playing it. We might play some today.
Okay. How long is it?
I couldn't tell you. Will, do you remember about how long it is?
Not off the top of my head.
Okay.
How long to beat has it at 6 hours?
Oh, wow. Okay, so we might be like halfway through then.
Yeah, because I thought it was pretty short. I didn't realize it was that short. But
I knew it was short, but yeah, not quite that short. But yeah, we will see how it goes.
Sounds good. What else have you been rocking?
The only other thing I'll touch on real quick is I continue to play Guacamelee 2.
Guacamelee.
I would have finished it by now had I not got sidetracked by Monster Hunter and Into the Breach. Because I don't think it's that long of a game, but yeah, some things happened.
We needed your honking horn, okay?
Dude, I'm happy to jam on that horn. That's a good time. But yeah, I'm still rocking with Guacamelee 2. I actually got a little bored with it because and it's a weird thing too because it's one of those games that you play it and it's like, this is a very well made game. And then it's like, but it's also very much like the first Guacamelee. And it's like, even though I like that first Guacamelee a lot, and this is, I feel like this game's at least as good as the original one. It's just like, I guess in the 5 years since that game came out and like all the other games that have come out, like it just doesn't seem as, like there have been a lot of like 2D action games in the indie scene in those 5 years. And I guess it just doesn't feel as impressive now as it did then. I don't know. But for whatever reason, it's just like not quite grabbing me the same way as the original one did, even though I think it's every bit as good of a game.
Right.
So I'll probably see it through because it's not that long of a game. And like I said, I think it's a very well-made game. But yeah, something about it's just not grabbing me like I had hoped.
Gotcha.
My best guess is that yeah, it's very similar to that original game, and
just kind of more of the same. And you've already kind of done that, so it's
yeah,
not quite as new feeling, I guess.
That's my best guess. Yeah,
Well, I've got a theory. I'm thinking maybe like if the name wasn't Guacamelee and was instead like Into the Breach, I think you'd
that might do it.
You might get a little more.
You might be onto something here.
I think I'd probably be more interested in the 2018 release schedule if more games were just called Stardew Valley. So I think you're right.
That's interesting, yeah, because the first Guacamelee didn't really grab me. And I played through all of Severed and just felt kind of meh about it.
Yeah.
So, I don't know.
DrinkBox is like, because I also played one of their Tales from Space games. And they're very good at making like very polished, but I guess I'll say like not very mechanically complex games. So it's like they're very well made and like easily digestible games, but maybe not always like the most unique games.
Right.
Let's say. And the first Guacamelee I think is like, I think the Guacamelee games are their better, like probably the best games they've made that I've played. And the first Guacamelee, I guess, came out at a time where like there weren't a lot of really sharp 2D action games being made anymore.
Right.
But like now we get those all the time. So I guess it just doesn't stand out as much. I don't know. It's a weird thing. But I'll probably see it through. We'll see.
Yeah, I was gonna say it sounds like it's just one of those. Like it's not necessarily bad, but you know, I've definitely had my fair share of those, as I'm sure that we all have. So
yeah, it's not a bad game, but yeah, not super grabbing me. If it was much longer than it was, I would not play more. Right. I think I'm probably close to the end.
Is there anything else that you wanted to touch on, Flex?
No, that was pretty much it.
All right. Well, let's see. Will, what are you thinking that you're gonna be playing here in the next couple of weeks between now and our next recording?
Well, in terms on the single player front, I'll probably continue my existential journey into Doctor Jonathan Reid.
All right.
And in Vampyr, and I'll probably continue playing Contradiction. And being Detective Ferguson. I have no idea what the guy's name is.
Jinx. Come on, man.
Jinx.
That's funny.
Sorry. Detective Jinx.
I like Ferguson better.
Investigator Jinx or whatever. Anyway, so I'll probably keep playing those. And then in terms of on the co-op front, I think I'm going to start a character in Path of Exile with a friend.
Okay.
Again. Probably going to keep playing. I played like an hour of How to Survive 2. So
all right.
That was on like a humble bundle for like $1. And then if I can enlist the help of one of our own ATACS members, I might play some Overcooked 2.
Ooh.
We got to cook things.
Gonna cook all them things.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds like fun.
Yum yums.
All right. Mr. Ryan, what are you thinking that you're going to do for the next couple of weeks?
I'll probably continue with the games that I've been on. I think I may end up finishing Avernum. Past that, I might start something portable because I'll be traveling for a couple days. Shortlist might be something like Phoenix Wright, or I might pick up Spider-Man. Heard good things about it. Kind of not sure. I've got enough other things to play that I'm making that decision, that new game indecision. It's like, oh man, do I want to pay full price right now and get this game that's probably going to be really good, or do I just give it a little time? Maybe finish up Dragon Quest or something like that.
Yeah, it'd probably still be good later.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, sure. Yeah. Like,
I don't know. Games do get stale. You leave them out in the open.
Does not taste fresh.
Kind of, yeah. You just can't leave them out in the open too long. So, yeah. Okay.
This game has mold on it.
Yeah, and I'm
make sure to refrigerate them.
Just open your fridge and you've got like PS4 cases everywhere.
Oh God, that's a problem. You shouldn't do that. Yeah. Flex, what about you?
Yeah, I have bought Marvel's Spider-Man. I have not started it, but I plan to soon. Otherwise, continue playing A Way Out and likely Guacamelee 2 and maybe some more Into the Breach.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Disappointed sigh.
What are you talking about? Nothing to be disappointed about.
I'm not disappointed. I think you may catch and surpass my FTL time.
Well, see, now I got it split between 2 versions, so I don't know.
Oh boy,
it's going to be harder to measure, but
you're going to have to use a stopwatch.
I think you're getting there.
Yeah.
When I started the Switch version, I just started right on hard, and there's a funny anecdote from my very first playthrough was I accidentally sold, like I did all 4 islands with the Riftwalkers, got to the final island, and this is on hard, and accidentally sold, like when I was spending I was in the shop after completing the 4th island, I accidentally sold my primary weapon on the combat mech, so his punch, which is like one of the best weapons in the game.
Yep,
that's pretty solid.
Yeah, so I accidentally sold that, and I was just sitting, like, the second it happened, I was like, oh no. And I'm like, well, I guess we'll just go into this final battle and see what happens, and I ended up winning.
Nice.
And the combat mech, like, basically couldn't do anything. Like, all I had on him was a weapon that, like, Ryan may have encountered one of these, that, like, puts out a tank that can, like, put a shield on something.
Right.
Yeah.
So basically, combat mech first turn would throw out that tank, and then combat mech would just go sit on a emergent spot and heal every turn.
Okay.
And then I would have that little tank shielding something, and then the other 2 mechs had to do all the dirty work.
I kind of wonder about that finale, which I haven't played it on hard, but most of the times I've played it, it's felt pretty manageable. There were a couple times where I didn't have, I don't know if it was good damage, or there were a couple times where I was having trouble killing some of the enemies floating around, and that felt like it got a little dicey because they do throw some alphas at you, and it's like, okay.
I mean, I think it's definitely
water or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of number of enemies and the health of the enemies, it's definitely the toughest mission in the game. Like, they throw a lot at you. But I guess if you've kept up with, like, some good weapons and upgrades and stuff, like, I've never felt like that fight is unwinnable when I go into it.
Yeah, and I guess the other thing too is, I mean, the tone of your campaign probably sets the tone of that battle, because I don't know if I ever went in with, like, less than 3 or 4 power on my grid, and that's when the gloves kind of come off, and you can make sacrifices to your power grid without even really like, you're like, okay, well, my grid takes 1 point of damage here, like it's not the, it doesn't matter basically at all.
And I've also even sacrificed pilots in that last mission to, like, block something and take the hit and be like, well, this is the final mission, so it doesn't matter. So you can get a little more out of that. Yeah, I do always try and go, because I have lost the final mission once or twice, and I always go in, and both of those times, the 1 or 2 times it happened, I wasn't at full power when I went in, and things got dicey.
Right.
Because I think it's more likely you're going to take some hits in that fight. But yeah, I feel like as long as I make sure I go in with full power, like, I'll probably get through.
Makes sense.
All right. Well, as far as for me, I'm probably going to continue on the No Man's Sky train, and then I've still been playing Persona 4 on Vita, which I'm about 85% of the way through. So I'll probably finish that up here in the next little bit. Nice. So yeah. Well, I think that's going to just about wrap it up for us. We have been adults. We've been talking about cool stuff. This has been ATACS episode number 45. We're going to break. We're going to play video games, watch anime, and come back and talk about more stuff in about 2 weeks for episode 46. So tune in then, and thanks for listening.